Look closely at almost any modern fighter jet from Europe, Russia, or China. You'll see them, these small, forward-mounted wings near the cockpit. They're called Canards. The Eurofighter Typhoon has them, the Dassault Rafale has them, Russia's Su-30 family and China's J-20 swear by them. They are the key to incredible, physics-defying agility. Now, look at America's apex predators, the F-22 Raptor, the king of air superiority, the F-35 Lightning II, the most advanced and expensive weapon system in history. Nothing. Clean wings, no canards. This isn't an accident, it's not a design flaw, it's a decision that reveals a deep, fundamental split in the philosophy of air combat, a chasm that separates how the United States plans to fight its next war versus almost everyone else. The question is why? Why did the US abandon a technology that gives fighters incredible maneuverability? The answer isn't about aerodynamics, it's about a choice between being the best duelist in a knife fight or being the unseen sniper a mile away. And understanding that choice tells you everything you need to know about modern air power. If you're fascinated by the tech that rules our skies, make sure you're subscribed because we're about to unpack one of the biggest debates in military aviation. So what are these little wings actually doing? On a traditional aircraft, the horizontal tail at the back pushes down on the tail to lift the nose up. Think of it like a seesaw. To lift one end, you have to push down on the other. This is stable, but it's inefficient. That downward force is essentially dead weight. It's fighting the main wing's primary job of creating lift. Canards flipped that entire concept on its head. Placed at the front, a canard generates lift, not downforce. So when the pilot wants to pull up, the canards lift the nose, and in doing so, they contribute to the total lift of the aircraft. The whole plane gets pulled up rather than just pivoting. But their real magic trick is something called vortex lift. As air rushes over the canard, it creates a powerful, swirling vortex of energy. This vortex then travels back and flows over the main wing, supercharging it. It keeps the air attached to the wing surface, even at extreme angles of attack, preventing the jet from stalling. This is what gives canard-equipped fighters their spectacular agility and maneuverability, especially in a slow-speed, high-G turning fight, the classic dogfight. For many of the world's air forces, this agility is non-negotiable. Look at the Eurofighter Typhoon. It's a consortium project designed by nations who expected to fight over the skies of Europe in potentially crowded airspace. They needed a jet that could win a visual range turning battle. The same goes for the French Dassault Rafale, a master of versatility that prizes its ability to get into a close-quarters brawl and win. The design philosophy here is clear. The dogfight is not dead. These nations believe that despite the rise of long-range missiles, combat can and will devolve into a furball, where the most agile aircraft has the advantage. The Russian approach, exemplified by the Sukhoi Su-30 and its derivatives, takes this to an extreme. Their jets are famous for performing incredible aerial ballets, like the Pugachev's Cobra, all enabled by a combination of canards and thrust vectoring. Their doctrine has historically valued supermaneuverability, believing it can be used to evade missiles and gain a positional advantage for a kill. For them, the canard isn't an option, it's a core component of their air combat identity. They are building the ultimate knife fighters. To understand why the US went in a completely different direction, we have to go back to the skies over Vietnam. America entered that war with a new and dangerous idea. They believed the dogfight was obsolete. They built jets like the F-4 Phantom II, a monster of an aircraft with powerful engines and the world's most advanced radars and missiles. Some early versions didn't even have a cannon. The thinking was simple. You'd detect the enemy from miles away and destroy them with a missile before they ever knew you were there. But it didn't work out that way. The missiles were unreliable, the rules of engagement often required visual identification, and American pilots found themselves dragged into close-range turning fights with smaller, more agile North Vietnamese MiGs. The powerful F-4 struggled in these slow-speed duels. The kill ratios were shockingly poor. Vietnam was a hard-learned lesson, written in blood and seared into the memory of the U.S. Air Force. They learned two things. First, you can't neglect maneuverability. Second, and more importantly, the initial promise of beyond visual range combat was the future. They just hadn't perfected it yet. The solution wasn't to build a better dogfighter, but to truly make the dogfight obsolete. The generation of jets that came after Vietnam, the F-15 Eagle and F-16 Falcon, were the direct result of that lesson. They were designed around a concept called energy maneuverability. The idea was that winning a fight wasn't just about turning the tightest circle, but about managing your aircraft's energy, its speed and altitude. An F-15 pilot might not outturn a smaller jet in a slow fight, but they could use their immense engine power to climb vertically, reposition, and then dive back into the fight from a position of advantage. These jets were agile, but their design prioritized power and speed over pure slow-speed turning performance. They had large tails and powerful flight controls that provided all the maneuverability they needed without the added complexity of Canards. They were designed to dominate the fight in the vertical plane, not just the horizontal one. The F-15, with its undefeated air-to-air combat record, proved the theory worked. The U.S. had found a way to be highly maneuverable without resorting to Canards. But even as these jets were ruling the skies, another revolution was already starting in the secret hangars of the Nevada desert. That revolution was stealth. It began with the F-119 Nighthawk. This wasn't a fighter, it was an attack aircraft designed to be invisible to radar. It achieved this through a radical design of flat panels angled to deflect radar waves away from the emitter, a concept called faceting. The F-119 was aerodynamically unstable, slow, and couldn't dogfight at all, but it could slip through the most advanced air defenses on Earth completely undetected. This was a game changer. The experience with the F-119 proved that the ultimate advantage in air combat wasn't speed or agility, it was information. Specifically, it was ensuring your enemy had none. The ability to see your opponent when they cannot see you is bigger a tactical advantage than anything else. This became the new holy grail for the United States Air Force. The next generation of fighter wouldn't just be an evolution of the F-15, it would have to combine the performance of an Eagle with the invisibility of the Nighthawk. And this is where Canards run into a massive, unavoidable problem.
Ultimately, this entire design divergence comes down to one thing: America's absolute unwavering commitment to beyond visual range, or BVR, combat. The entire U.S. air combat ecosystem is built around a single mantra: first look, first shot, first kill. The goal is to use a network of assets, satellites, AWACS planes, and the fighters themselves to build a comprehensive picture of the airspace. A stealth fighter like an F-22 or F-35 pushes forward, using its low observability to get close enough for its powerful sensors to detect the enemy without being detected itself. It then either engages with its own long-range missiles, like the AIM-120 AMRAAM, or it acts as a spotter, passing targeting data back to a non-stealthy F-15 loaded with a dozen missiles. In this scenario, the fight is won or lost before the opposing pilots are close enough to see each other. A dogfight, in this doctrine, is considered a mission failure. It means something has gone terribly wrong. Why would you optimize your aircraft for a failure state at the cost of the very thing, stealth, that prevents that failure from happening in the first place? There's also a more practical, less philosophical reason for avoiding Canards. They add complexity and weight. That means more hydraulic systems, more actuators, more complex flight control software, and more things that can break. Every additional component is a potential point of failure and a definite increase in maintenance hours. For an aircraft like the F-35, which is already one of the most complex machines ever built, adding another set of moving control surfaces would drive up costs and reduce readiness rates. U.S. aircraft are often designed for expeditionary use, operating far from home bases. Reliability and ease of maintenance are major factors. While a Canard might offer a performance edge in one specific part of the flight envelope, the U.S. military-industrial complex calculated that the cost in terms of money, weight, and maintenance hours wasn't worth the trade-off, especially when technologies like thrust vectoring could provide similar benefits without compromising the core design principles of stealth and reliability. It's a pragmatic calculation that often gets lost in the more exciting debate about dogfighting. Stealth, or low observability, is a science of shapes and materials. It's about carefully controlling every single surface, every edge, every join on an aircraft to minimize how much radar energy it reflects back to a receiver. Think of a stealth fighter's radar cross-section, or RCS, as its radar signature. A conventional fighter might look like a giant metal barn door on radar. A stealth fighter aims to look like a tiny steel marble or even smaller. Canards are the enemy of this goal for several reasons. First, they are two extra moving surfaces. The gap between the canard and the fuselage creates a corner reflector, a shape that bounces radar energy almost perfectly back to its source. Second, their sharp leading edges are difficult to make stealthy. And third, to be effective, canards have to move a lot. Every time they move, they change their angle relative to incoming radar waves, potentially creating a brief, bright flash on an enemy's screen. That's all it takes, a momentary flash that says, "I'm here." For a design philosophy built around total invisibility, this is an unacceptable compromise. You can't be mostly stealthy. You either are or you aren't. So, if the US was going to sacrifice the agility benefits of canards for stealth, how would they make up for that lost maneuverability? The answer lies at the back of the F-22 Raptor: two-dimensional thrust vectoring. Instead of just pushing the jet forward, the F-22's engine nozzles can move up and down by 20 degrees. This allows the pilot to direct the engine's immense thrust. By vectoring the nozzles up, the tail is pushed down and the nose pitches up with incredible authority, far faster than any conventional elevator could. In a high G turn, this technology allows the F-22 to literally force its nose into the direction of the turn, achieving maneuvers that seem to defy the laws of aerodynamics. It gives the Raptor the kind of super maneuverability that other nations use canards for, but it does so without compromising its forward stealth profile. The mechanisms are at the rear of the aircraft, shielded by the fuselage and wings from frontal radar. It's a complex, expensive, and brilliant solution. It provides the agility of a dogfighter with the invisibility of a stealth platform. The best of both worlds, according to US doctrine. And what about the F-35? It doesn't have canards, and it doesn't have the F-22's thrust vectoring either. Many critics point to this and call it a less capable aircraft. But that's because the F-35 isn't designed to be a pure dogfighter. It's playing a completely different game. The F-35 is first and foremost a flying sensor and data hub. Its greatest weapon isn't a missile, it's its brain. The combination of its AESA radar, its distributed aperture system that gives the pilot 360-degree vision through the skin of the aircraft, and its ability to fuse all this information into a single, coherent picture of the battle space is its true advantage. The F-35's job is to use its stealth to get close, gather information, share it with every other friendly asset in the area, and ensure that any fight is over long before it becomes a visual range turning contest. For the F-35, adding canards would be pointless. It would compromise its all-important stealth for a capability, extreme dogfighting agility, that its entire design philosophy is meant to ever having to use. It's not a knife fighter, it's the quarterback. Now, this all makes a neat story. The US chose stealth, everyone else chose agility. But there's one major aircraft that breaks the mold: China's Chengdu J-20. It's a fifth-generation fighter that is clearly designed with stealth in mind, but it has canards, big ones. So what's going on here? There are a few theories. One is that China's doctrine is a hybrid. They want the stealth to get into the fight, but they still believe that fight might end up as a close-range dogfight, and they want the agility from canards to win it. Another theory relates to aerodynamic performance. The J-20's specific design might require canards to provide enough lift and control, especially for supercruise, the ability to fly supersonic without afterburners. It's also possible that Chinese engineers have found a way to shape and control the canards to minimize their radar cross-section,
a compromise they find acceptable. Or, perhaps most compellingly, the J-20's stealth might be optimized for a different threat. It may be shaped to be most invisible to radars from the front and sides, while accepting a larger signature from other angles, a trade-off the U.S. was unwilling to make for the F-22 and F-35.